Welcome back, and today we're going to be continuing our 5 key series on how to develop a mind's eye with key number 4, belief systems.
Meow.
Welcome back to Aphantasia Meow, guys. My name is Alec, and like I said, you're here at key number 4. We're almost through the series now, one more episode to come next week. And I'll forewarn you before we jump into this key, it is pretty much the hardest one to master out of any of them. Okay, but that being said, it's super integral to developing a mind's eye, to developing hyperphantasia, prophantasia, whatever you're going after, and even other skills outside of just the mind's eye journey. Super, super, super important. So without further ado, let's get to it. All right, key number 4, belief systems. Now, when I'm talking about belief systems, I'm talking about the kind of inner voice thoughts, thought life that we have that tell us what is real, what is not, what our experience of life is like, and what isn't. Now, we'll unpack this a lot as we go, and I'll tell you about why it's been so important. This was one that I actually didn't start with. It kind of developed as I went, and I'll get into the story of how that actually happened while we go. So here we go. And I definitely recognize as we get into this one that this is probably the trickiest one to crack. This is one of these keys that is tricky. It's got some really interesting dynamics to it. And feel free to message me, feel free to comment, anything that comes up as you watch this video. I'd love to be able to discuss this stuff with you. But it absolutely is one of the main things that helps progress the mind's eye and helps progress other types of visualization as well. So I'd be holding back on all of you guys if I didn't talk about this one, even though it can be a little touchy, even for me, it's a challenge still. So here we go. Let's dive in. Now, as we dive in, I have to go back and have a little bit of a story time here. So back when I first started this channel, I knew my cousin was aphantasic and I so wanted to help her because it's not like she was just okay with it. She actually wanted to be able to visualize. And I don't know, my heart I had empathy for her. I wanted to be able to help her in some way. And what ended up happening with her is that she got pretty dramatic breakthrough. So she went from describing aphantasia as any really person that is experiencing aphantasia does, even so far as to say that her dreams felt like she had walked through a place and was at a place, but it was all like blindfolded. So she had a memory of that event of the dream, but none of the visual association was attached to it. And as we started up the sessions and just went forward, not really knowing what would happen, on session 5, she had her first breakthrough where she recognized something new for herself. And that was like a real crazy moment for us, and by session 7, she was able to actually look at a bottle of shampoo or something, turn around, and then think of the image of that bottle of shampoo in her head. But it was still pretty weak on a scale of like 0% being total aphantasia to 100%. It was still only like 10%. But then what was interesting is we caught up a week later after the 7 main sessions were done. And what had happened was it had grown a little bit. And so now she could think of herself on a beach. Now she could think of the waves rolling in and kind of perceive the sight of these waves rolling in. And instead of like a 10, it was more like a 10 to 15%. And so that was really interesting because she didn't practice in between then and now. And actually, she had some hypnagogic experiences as well, where flashes would happen when she was falling asleep. 2 really vivid ones for her. One was a Minecraft one. So she saw a creeper coming down the stairs at her. And so from there, I was really curious to see if that growth would continue. Now, this is where it gets interesting because 3 months later, I was at family vacation and she was also there. And I'm sitting with my jaw to the floor because one night she's telling the family, hey, I can't visually imagine. Just never have been able to. And I was sitting there going, what? Cuz what about the, breakthrough that we had experienced during your sessions? And she looked at me and she was like, I don't remember that. I don't remember any breakthrough. And I went, whoa, this is a trip. And so we sat down and we were going to do a full catch-up session, right? And I'm glad that I took notes. I do with every client. I'll just type out notes to help me remember, help record what their experience was during the sessions themselves. And I'll kind of put in bold if stuff stands out. And so I went back through the notes with her and I was like, cuz, remember this part? Remember that part? Remember that breakthrough? Do you remember what happened here? And she was like, oh yeah. And it all came back. And what was really interesting about that is once the memory of it came back of having that breakthrough, then she was able to access the mind's eye again. So the ability returned after that. And it wasn't something that I talked about a whole lot, actually at all, with my early people that I worked with the early clients. I almost didn't even want to go there with them, like addressing the belief system behind being able to access these different things. Um, but after I saw that, I realized that by not addressing our own belief systems, not only will we hold ourselves back sometimes from being able to progress, but also that you could actually overwrite breakthrough that does happen where it's imperceivable or it makes you forget, like in her case. I think that was a pretty extreme case, but it did happen. So it's always possible, right? And I know for me, this has been huge in my own life, my own journey, my own progression with these things. So let's unpack it a little bit more. Now, I'd like to describe something that I call the piano analogy. And this is likened to the mind's eye in a lot of ways. Learning an instrument is very much like practicing the mind's eye. So now let's take somebody that wants to learn piano, right? But they don't know anything about piano yet. Now, if that person has the belief system in place or the subconscious belief that they absolutely 100% would never be able to play piano, they just can't. There's just something there that maybe, I don't know, they believe that their hands are too small or maybe too big or whatever it may be, that they're just not musically inclined. And there's 100% that they are not going to be able to play piano. What's interesting is they would probably never want to start piano lessons, right? They just like, what's the point? Like 100%, there's no doubt in their mind that they cannot play piano. Now, for that person, not only would they not approach lessons like I just mentioned, but if they did try to do lessons, it's likely that they wouldn't get very far, or it's likely that there'd be some measure of self-sabotage, right? Some measure where their own thought process behind doing the piano is holding them back from actually taking the steps to learn it. They would, try to learn chopsticks and just go, I just can't do it. It's ridiculous. I'm out of here. Now, depending on the skill, some measure of this would probably be present no matter what we're trying to learn. Like if somebody doesn't believe that they're really good at learning languages, then it would be hard to learn a language, and so on and so forth. You could apply that sort of concept to any sort of new skill that someone's trying to pick up. So what adjusting your belief system and your subconscious belief behind that thing that you're trying to do or learn is it just opens the door in your mental landscape to make progress possible. And another story I can think of that's a good demonstration of this is, the 4-minute mile. Nobody had ever broken the 4-minute mile, and scientists and sports doctors and stuff actually thought that it was humanly impossible. And then once the 4-minute mile was finally broken by somebody that believed they could break it, that's the key there. They believed that they could, and they worked for it, and they worked towards it like that. Then and only then was it possible for others to start breaking it. And then we started seeing 3-minute, high 3-minute miles being broken. And it kept progressing until now we're at 3 minutes, 43.13. And that is wild that it progressed that far, But it took that first guy to actually say to himself and everyone else that, hey, we can do this, and I'm going for it. So yeah, by adjusting your thought progress, we'll talk about how to do that after this slide, you will completely open the door for progress to start being made. One last thing on this that I'll add that I think is really important is that there are those that would say that there's no evidence that we can even change it, like aphantasia is just a set thing, right? And while that's true that we don't have concrete evidence yet, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence from people who are working on it, who have been able to make progress, either small or great. And so those kinds of stories are mounting, growing and growing and growing. Also, there's no hard evidence that you can't change it either. Even the very first patient, MX, the very first case of aphantasia, it was acquired for him. He went down for surgery, he came out with aphantasia. But then after about a month, some of his visualization capacity did start returning. Now, that's a little bit different than somebody starting from scratch that's just been experiencing aphantasia since birth. However, it is something to take into account. Another thing to keep in mind is that with all of the strides in neuroplasticity that have been made within the past 15 years in that field of study, also with neurogenesis, where we now know that neurons can actually be created within the brain, where before we thought it was more of like a set number, it's very reasonable to believe that the brain can rewire itself to learn new things or adapt to different situations. So just some food for thought. All right, so strategy time. Here we go. So, number one thing is definitely start to work on rewriting your thought patterns and belief systems about this stuff. Now, let's talk about how we can actually start to do that. What you want to do in the beginning is to begin to catch yourself and the I can't thoughts and start to rewrite them to I'm not able to yet, but I will. And it's a huge shift from believing that it's just a wall that you can't surpass, you absolutely cannot do it, to no, I'm not experiencing what I want to yet, but there will come a day when I do. And I still butt up against these, depending on what sort of skill I'm trying to learn. Sometimes it can feel like I really can't, but if I can start to shift how I think about it and how I talk about it and how it comes out of my mouth, how it comes out of my heart, and start to actually believe that it is possible for me to overcome that thing, then it becomes much more likely that I'll see progress on it. So, what you want to do is begin to mold your subconscious mind to believe that you'll not only do it someday, but you're already doing it or you're already stepping towards progress. Now, this one's really tricky because let's say you've just taken up a new practice and you haven't seen any progress yet. There's a reality that you have not experienced any progress yet, and that makes total sense. And it's this key is not about entering into denial whatsoever. But if you can take your thoughts and say, yeah, I haven't made progress, but it's coming, and continue to step forward for yourself, that's where progress can happen. And I'm not going to lie to you, though, this is somewhat of a catch-22. It's like this weird dynamic. How can you make progress if you haven't seen progress yet? And that's where this key is so tricky, because sometimes it's very, very true that believing comes before seeing. And that was absolutely true in my own progression with especially prophantasic sort of ability, where I was projecting images. Because while I did recognize subtle breakthroughs before, it was really when I started to shift my perception around the practice of how I taught myself how to do that. And that's when stuff really started to open up and I started to see more. And that's also true with hyperphantasia, actually, too, now that I think about it, because I would start to experience these things. And it was really after I started to realize how dynamic that actually was that it started to grow more. And I started to experience more of that specific mental prowess in my own life. Now, there's some resources I like to point you guys to down in the description section. Because this is a really big topic of rewiring the subconscious to believe something different than we're normally thinking. So I want to make sure that you guys are pointed in the right direction. And I'll leave some of those other resources that I know of down in the description. And if you know of any, feel free to comment them as well. Are you still there? Yeah? Okay, so I know that one's, quite a hard pill to swallow. Saying that it has a lot to do with how we think about the topic entirely and making it possible in our mind first. However, it really does make a huge, huge difference in terms of developing the mind's eye, but also developing any other types of skills as well in life. Like, things will only be possible that we can step into, whether they're physical skills or anything else, if we first take that mental leap and believe that it is possible. So this doesn't only apply to mind's eye development, it can apply to really any new skill that you're going after in life. I'll also say that this doesn't mean that you have to be in denial about your position or what you experience. So it's not that somebody with aphantasia who is experiencing aphantasia should say, no, I actually don't experience it. And maybe they actually do. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is you can kind of tweak how you're thinking about it. Like with that piano analogy, if I want to learn piano, it's not that I can't play piano, it's that I don't play it yet and I'm going to. See, so it's just a slight, subtle kind of mindset tweak around new skills that you're developing. And with that, that's it for this key. Next week, we're going to wrap up this series, key number 5. And until then, feel free to reach out to me, book a free session with me. I offer an hour for anybody that wants to chat. And the Discord server has been a lot of fun so far, a lot of amazing conversations, people sharing breakthroughs in there, students and non-students. So please head into the Discord server and at least peruse the breakthrough channel, because it's quite fascinating to read other people's accounts. All right, see you next week.